Welcome to episode 178 of the Daniel Yours podcast with today's guest, Ryan Yusella. Let's go. Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. Joined here today by Ryan Yusella. Ryan, thanks for being here, my man. I appreciate your time.
Hey, Daniel. Thanks for having me. How we doing?
I'm doing great, and I know that it's always weird to say hello again after we've just been chatting, but this is
it's
the way
only
the
as
podcast
weird as you
goes.
make it.
This is true. This is true. I want to start off asking you this. Your Instagram handle, the Meatball365. I got to imagine there's some significance behind that. What is it? And I think this will help explain who you are and what you do.
Fun fact is I actually used to get called when I was super heavy. So before I moved here about 7 years ago, I was upwards of like 285, 295. And a girl I was dating at the time actually used to call me Meatball, and not in like a nice way. And after like all those things freaking ended and stuff like that, and I moved here, the nickname kind of stuck a little bit. So I actually turned it into a little bit of a business model.
Nice.
But we have the Meatball 365 primarily because my last Instagram, just Meatball Methods, got deleted. I don't know. I got kicked off of Instagram. So we started a new one.
Well, there you go. I mean, the all powerful social media gods, doing their thing, which kind of sucks.
Ugh.
Yeah, horrendous. Well, I guess that didn't really explain much of what it is they do, but how do you explain what it is they do?
I would say the biggest thing is just kind of like, I always looked at traditional coaching and stuff like that. And even a couple people I've worked with, I've been told, when I go to work with them, I've been told they're like, we need a meatball because everything else freaking failed. So it's like almost, okay, everything that's standard and traditional and been told to you through, since like Kingdom Come has failed you and you still have no answers. All right, let's try some other stuff that we probably haven't actually had, and that's going to be the meatball method. So we kind of just throwing ourselves out there a little bit more and trying some non-traditional stuff and seeing if some stuff actually sticks. Dealt with a lot of body pain over the years and a lot of people who have a lot of body pain. And the thing is even in my earlier years, I tried to keep it strict. I tried the Stuart McGill thing, all of the little back pain specialist things and stuff like that. And it actually just made everything significantly worse. So much to the point where my right leg was pretty much like 90% like numb and dead at one point. Like I couldn't even put weight on it. My foot wouldn't hold weight. This right leg was just like gone. Size was still there, but it was pretty much useless. And I drugged the thing around for about 9 months until kind of figured out a couple ways different, work with my massage therapist to fix things up. And about 2 years ago, I came in contact with my coach, and that's when things actually really started rolling a little bit. But I had tried a couple coaches over the years, and I was just kind of like very disappointed. Tried a couple mobility coaches, seeing if someone could like help me fix the hip issue, fix the low back issue that I had been like dealing with since like high school. And no one had even gotten close. So I'm sitting here and I'm like, well, if you smart people can't freaking do it, I guess a meatball can outsmart you motherfuckers. So that's kind of where we go with that one.
Yeah, no, I feel that deeply, man, because I've dealt with a ton of injuries myself. And speaking as someone who is an online coach, I don't think that online coaching is very conducive to figuring out the solution to these like very, very individual injury-like issues most of the time. Because I've learned myself that I can kind of deal with my own shit. I figured it out now after dealing with it for 10, 15 years. But I don't know that someone else could figure it out because none of the traditional stuff works. Nothing in the textbook is what is going to solve it. It's just stuff that works for me. And so if I put myself in someone else's shoes where it's like, hey, they're dealing with a hip injury, a leg, a knee, a shoulder, or whatever, and all the normal stuff, doesn't really work. It's like, well, online is not really the medium for this. I got to get my hands on you. I got to see you in person. I got to feel you and move you around and put you in different positions and figure out what works, and we can do that. But it then becomes largely an individual endeavor to figure out what's going to fix yourself.
A lot of that stuff, I initially had that where I physically had to actually be in person, and clearly me in person is going to be 10 times better than me at a distance. But I have noticed after doing some of the distance work a little bit longer, and even during lockdown and stuff, I did virtual coaching like this for 2 years, like probably like a dozen sessions a week. And the thing is like you start getting better at evaluating with your, like the eye gets a lot better. Um, and this is one of those things. It's kind of almost knowing what you actually need to look at. And I actually look at very few things. Some of the things that I'm realistically looking at when I'm evaluating people is some like very standard stuff. I'm kind of looking to see like how do your feet sit on the ground. I'm seeing where do your knees, ankles, and hips line up? Like where does your belly button sit in line with your sternum? Is your head like kind of at like some weird shifted, rotated over position? Like is where are you sitting in space at like a comfort zone? And a lot of people who have had tons and tons of pain, even some people who I've like worked on and done some body work with in the last like couple years, um, even recently in the last couple months, they had been to dozens of PTs. The one guy who I work with, he had had over a dozen MRIs and they were ready to shave down the head of his femur.
Jeez.
And we did some basic realignment stuff and some rib shifting and a couple different things, like remanipulating a couple things, and he's not having that done now. So
Amazing.
the thing is it's the information is out there. I would say the biggest thing I think that really has helped me the most is trying to almost expose myself to the ranges that hurt the most. The really big question that we start coming into is what's the entry point for that?
Right.
So maybe like, oh, my back hurts on deadlifting. Okay, well, it probably does. So does it hurt when you pick things up out in front of you? Yeah, it does. Okay, well, stand sideways and see if it hurts when you pick it up laterally. No, it doesn't. Okay, well, that's still a deadlift. We're doing single side pickups. Then as that gets a little better, you start getting used to shimmying a little bit more, and now we start building out from there. So some of these things, it's like it may not be something that's super standard. It might just be like 90-degree rotation, like, or maybe you reverse it or something like that. The biggest thing I had a big issue with, even when I was younger, my left side was like very just like not engaged. Um, I have a theory on that. I was electrocuted when I was 2.
Huh.
So I plugged in a lamp and I got zapped really freaking bad. And I think that clamped up a couple things. And I think it's just, I mean, I'm 33 going on 34. So we're talking 30 years ago now. I don't know if any, I don't
Seems
think,
plausible.
I mean, guess what? You're still at a developmental age. They don't know what walking looks like for you. They don't know what any of this stuff. And you're barely upright at that point.
Yeah.
But then you have enough injuries over time and it kind of says like, okay, well, what's this really from? And I can try to put my finger on what it's actually from, or I can just handle where I'm at right now. It'll drive you nuts if you keep trying to with compounding injuries and stuff like that, and tons of sitting and weird walking and all the weird stuff that's happened over like a dozen years or something like that. It's probably not just one thing.
Yeah. It's a
Um,
compounding of so many different things for sure. Over a long
Yeah,
period
it's
of time.
like you tore your adductor, and then because you tore your adductor, you stopped walking for 6 months, and then you sat on your left ass cheek for too long, and now you're all twisted, and now you can't figure out why you have one side pain. Well, your pelvis looks like a Rubik's cube, and your rib cage is like looks like a tray of dishes in the freaking sink, and it's on the wrong side.
Yeah.
Like, so it's like a couple things need to like almost reshift. It's like when people tell me they're having a lot of pain, and I even just look at them at rest or at neutral, and I'm like, I see it. Like
Yeah.
I know where I can see. I clearly see something hurts. So it's like you kind of it's almost you just need to see it enough times. Um, my evaluation process really changed. I would say I worked with a client in Staten Island for a little over a year. She was in a really bad car accident, and she was technically labeled as a quadriplegic. She had been through probably like 2 dozen PTs, more than a handful of OTs. Her hands would clamp down overnight. Her body would spasm up. Like you'd see like full spasticity. She was on probably like she was on I don't know if you're familiar with muscle relaxers, but they had her on a crap load of baclofen, which is a black label muscle relaxer, which is pretty toxic.
Okay.
And it was maxed out. Now, the thing is like even you look and when you work with someone of this nature, now is where we start seeing where traditional shit actually doesn't do a fucking thing. Like what do you do with someone whose body hits the reset button every 24 hours? Like,
It's
that's the
tough.
real question. Yeah.
Yeah,
You
that's
come
not in the
back
textbook.
in back to normal,
Yeah,
or what did we do the previous time that made it less at back to normal? A lot of these things are like big questions that we had to solve. And I was spending probably 14 hours there a week, and I was working hand in hand with my massage therapist. And it's like, this is actually where I think that the best coaches start getting developed. They had the most challenges and they had the most problem solving. The thing that I tell people is like, guess what? If you want to learn how to solve a problem, find something that seems almost like unsolvable and maybe try to figure a way to at least take a bite out of it.
yeah, that's good advice. The most challenging clients are for sure the ones you learn from. If you only coach 20-year-old boys with no injuries, like everything you do will work, and you won't learn anything. You could just do anything, make them walk 3 laps around the gym, they're gonna grow and get stronger.
Yeah, man. If
But
I could give a weight training program to every 14, 15, and 16-year-old and teach them the basics, like this country would look absolutely insanely different.
I 1,000,000% agree with that. I very strongly agree with that, and I can't think of a good reason other than lack of efficiency and incompetence as to why proper strength training is not something that is widely taught in high schools. It's really
I don't
not
know.
that difficult, and it would make a gigantic difference. But
I
that
have a
will get
hard
us down a
time.
down a rabbit hole that I'm not sure that we want to go down.
I mean, I have a hard time. I mean, I understand why, but at the same time, it's like you're looking at this and it's like you're paying for a gym teacher when realistically you might as well hire a strength coach instead, and they can do both the jobs. Now, I'm not here to talk shit on gym teachers, because guess what? It's a viable degree. And the thing is, though, like I've seen a lot of like, I had some friends who were like actual, like in PE school for like phys ed, and I just was not impressed.
Yeah.
Like maybe that needs to be a condensed field into XI or something like that, where PE teachers are in XI and now you have a couple routes depending on what you actually want to do. It would make more sense.
I
Like,
think it would be even from a higher scale. It's not necessarily the individuals, but it's also the curriculum that they are instructed to teach doesn't include
oh,
that.
it's so piss poor.
Yeah,
Like, even if you look at, I love the video that goes around on social media, like every like 6 months or so, and you see it's like the black and white of like, it wasn't Venice Beach. It was like, I forget what the gym protocol was back in like the 60s or 70s. And they're all doing like pull ups and sit ups and monkey bars. And like, it looked like almost like military training.
hmm.
And it was all calisthenic work. But I'm like, listen, like, you don't need a crazy gym to have impressive students or impressive athletes. I've seen people get really good with less.
Yeah,
Like, you need knowledge and you need to know how to put your toolbox to work. Like, the best coaches are the ones that figure shit out. Like, okay, busy gym floor, everything I want is taken. What do I do?
right. Some of the best training is actually the simplest training as well. Like I find that people get overwhelmed with different types of equipment and different machines and 1,000 different variations of an exercise, and they're like, which one should I do? And there's this paralysis analysis, and they do too many things, but none of them well at all.
Mm.
When the opposite might be true, where you have a more limited gym that doesn't have 17 different leg presses and 35 different rowing machines. It's like, okay, we got dumbbells, we got barbells,
Mm-hmm.
we've got some pull-up bars and maybe some rings or TRX suspension trainers and maybe a couple machines. Like, great, I've got like 7 exercises to work with. I'll just do those again and again and again and again and get stronger at them, and that will produce results.
I've gone through so many phases over the years where like I was using tons of machines, where I was using only primary movements, where I was using primarily all dumbbells. And the crazy part is now where I look at like where my stuff actually is, there's like maybe 3 legitimate strength training days in my week. And then the rest of it is torso work, abdominal work, jumping work, skipping work, rotational work. Like, yeah, there's weight involved in a lot of these things, but like when I'm doing a twisting press, I'm not considering that a heavy loading day. I'm considering
Right.
that actually more of like a standard like recovery day actually, because realistically the weight is not that insanely heavy. Like, yeah, you bending under a 45-degree plate is going to feel heavy and challenging because of your compromised position. But if it's a 45-pound plate, you deadlift more on the average regular most of the time. Like
Right.
you,
Right.
I can one arm 10 times more than that. Like, you know what I mean? It's just, you can
Yeah.
yank that off the floor if you really tried.
Yeah.
So the thing that we start seeing is, and I've even learned this from my coach, is that most of the things that you want to stick, you're probably going to have to apply load to. And that's even a lot of the bigger positions that I work into now, with like the long leg stretching, all the bending work and the hyperextension work and the abdominal work and stuff. And no, that's not where I started. Like, I actually started very minimalistic because I was in a shit ton of pain. Like, I still remember I did crossbox sit-ups for probably 6 months straight. And every single time I would tuck my tail under, my right hip would zap down my leg. And the thing is like, if your body's a little fucked up, you're going to have to accept the fact that that might actually be the reaction until it's not.
Right.
But the thing you need to pay attention to is like, do you feel things getting stronger in the weak areas? Do you feel more alignment coming through? Do you notice your walking and some of your posturing getting better? Like, yeah, the exercises can feel like dog shit, but how's the rest of everything outside of those?
Right. Are they
Because
still
the
having
thing
an
is
intended
like,
positive
guess
effect?
what? I don't casually squeeze an orange. If I'm going to make orange juice, I got to crush a freaking orange, right? Now, I'm
Right.
not saying every session needs to be like this, but stimulus and size of the hammer actually needs to make sense. Like, just like the fact that I'm not going to take a giant mallet to tack in something on a little wooden ship, and I'm not going to take a little tack hammer to try to drive a 2-inch steel plate into the ground.
Right.
Like,
Just to simplify this for a little bit, in case anyone missed the description of what you're just saying, is, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but trying to improve mobility, trying to stretch anything, for just a very generic term, which probably has a lot more meanings, is not just sit on the ground and touch your toes and hold it for 30 seconds while you're like, bracing as hard as you can. You've got to actually apply some load, have some methodology, do something that's individual and progressive and repeatable, so that you can then make that adaptation stick for the long term.
Stretching is an entry point. So
Right.
this is where we're looking for like the desensitization of getting some more range of motion. And we've seen a lot of coaches talk about this over the years, where like, you shouldn't static stretch prior to your lifting. And I'm like, guess what? I did that for years, and that was the most piss poor advice I have ever taken in my fucking life. Like, oh, the injury proneness. I'm like, guess what? You know how many athletes do a little bit of stretching right before they go do impressive ass shit all the time? You know how many people just actually just like don't even warm up relatively at all, and they just start running? Like, that's where we start talking about like underlying capacity. Like, what is your bottom level on your worst day? Like, being able to just casually walk out the door and go for a run, that's a pretty nice bottom level. Being able to walk over and casually pick up 200 plus pounds without physically doing a single thing. Like, we see some of these guys like, oh, well, this is 485 and I'm going to try to pick it up cold. Well, no, that's not something I would advise doing every single day, but training it as a skill is actually something that makes a whole lot of sense. Because when you're out in life, you ain't going to be able to reach down and touch your toes a couple times. Something's probably just going to freaking happen.
This is very true. That's actually a really good way of thinking about it, because the way that I always talk about mobility is that you need it when you least think that you're going to need it. And the example here in Canada, in New York, is like,
than you actually think as well.
Exactly. The most obvious one for me is, you're walking in the winter, you slip on some ice. You need to, put your foot out in a weird position to catch yourself from falling. You are probably going to have some level of abduction happening. So you're going to be not in like a perfectly straight right on lunge. Your knee is probably going to go over your toes and maybe outside, maybe even inside your toes, depending on which way you fall, like who knows. But it's going to happen in this very weird range that doesn't actually exist in any named exercise per se. That is a common amongst the regular gym folk. And so if you've never been there, the time when you actually need it, like that is when you're going to get injured. Injury is kind of when load exceeds capacity. And so if you've never been there, that's when you're getting injured. So you need to be able to do these things so that when you need it cold, like you said, you're not warmed up and ready to go and have your knee sleeves on and your, all your stuff on. Like, you gotta
That's what happened when I tore my bicep. My elbow hadn't extended in probably 10 years, maybe if ever. And then you throw something underhand grip overhead and the ball is loading and your elbow's trying to extend and it's never done it before. And it says, okay, I'm going to extend now. Pop.
Yeah. Yep.
And it's gone. And this is how people kind of like blow out knees and stuff like that. And it's also the impressive fact that I look at my coach Lucas and he has no ACL in his right knee. And the way that he got around that was by exposing his knee to challenging positions over time. So he learned to self-organize around the missing part. Right. Now, this is even where we talk about spine issues and hip issues and all this different shit. It's like finding the entry point is going to be the biggest underlying challenge for any single person and any single coach. And then knowing how to take a step up that ladder, not jumping 3 rungs up the ladder. Taking one single step up the ladder at a time. Because the thing is, I've tried rushing it, and guess what? You end up stuck on the floor, you end up doing something stupid again, something pops, and now you're pissed for 6 to 10 weeks.
Yes, exactly. This is one of the toughest things I think about the way that people perceive kind of like just mobility training and anything that's non-traditional. And it's a problem of social media. And the problem is that the stuff that is the entry point is so boring and looks so completely not cool at all that nobody will ever see that post on social media. It will never happen.
Yeah, but you put up a single leg back squat with a Bosu ball, and it's like, yo, can you just like burn the Bosu ball, please? Like, it just physically hurts my brain.
Yes, that. But even if you do like an actual good mobility drill of some sort, that's something that's legit. But it's like 3, 4, 5, 10 levels like above where the entry point is. That will look cool. It'll get views on social media, and people are like, oh, that's mobility training. Doing a 1-arm handstand, or doing a 500-pound single arm deadlift, with my back twisted, or some whatever weird shit. That's not the entry point. And so you go and try and do that, and you're like, oh no, mobility training sucks. This is not it. It's like, well,
you want to know one of the easiest entry points to shoulder ability? Hanging. But guess what?
There you go.
Hanging sucks.
Yeah. And how many posts have we seen about hanging?
Hanging is miserable the first couple times you do it. You assign someone 15 to 20 seconds and they're like, I can't hang that long. Be like, that's why we're hanging. Because you need to be able to hold on to shit. And you also need the ability to externally rotate at your elbow, which is going to open your wrist. Like, if your elbow does not turn, you're going to have wrist and shoulder problems and probably also neck issues.
Right.
I've worked with a couple. The one guy I work with has a 10-stage fusion. So from the bottom of his cervical spine and then almost his entire thoracic is completely fused. So, and they also had to reattach the radial nerve in his right shoulder, but they couldn't reattach it all the way. So they had to reattach it within a 1/4 inch, and they're like, it's going to grow. So we had to go with it. He had a twitchy arm for about 3 months, but then it finally filled in all the way, and now he got a full functioning tricep. So like, it's kind of interesting when we look at that type of stuff. But like, the biggest thing I do with him is we rotate, we bend, we do literally everything possible to create as much space around the issue that you can possibly find. And that's kind of what getting out of pain actually is. Something got too short on you, or something is not where it's supposed to be. And I need to find a way to create space. Yeah. Is it in a vertebrae? Is it in my rib cage? Is it in my hip? Is it in my knee? I need space somewhere because something is so compressed that it hurts like a motherfucker.
Right. So if hanging is a good entry point for shoulder stuff, assuming there's no major injury or whatever, what's a good entry point for, let's just kind of go through the body, but someone who is really immobile in their T-spine?
Someone who's really immobile in their T-spine, I mean, there's a bunch of things that you can realistically do. I do entry point with stuff on, we do yoga blocking, where you're spending time with the yoga block in your T-spine, in a different position to allow your spine to actually lengthen and also stretch through the front side. So any of my clients who are really stiff and rigid, especially anyone 65 plus, the first thing I teach them is the yoga block placements to do outside when I'm not seeing them physically. Don't get me wrong. The blocks will nudge you back into place when you feel a little messed up, but they also are a very nice entry point to extension and lengthening the stenosis at the spine. It's also a really good way to get your sacrum to move forward in space. So the thing is, if you're stuck really tail back, I can tell you to pull your tail under all you want, or I can have you rest your tail on a yoga block, let your hip decompress a little bit. Now your tail just tucks under on its own.
Right.
A lot of it's about the thing we see is that if you elevate the skeleton, for some reason, everything else starts lengthening. Now, this is where I was just even saying to my coach the other day, I was like, I actually think we want to talk about core muscles. I don't think your core is realistically muscles whatsoever. I think your spinal column is realistically your core. And that's actually the ability of your spinal column is going to be the indicative factor of how strong you can or cannot be. You look at a lot of people who are very, very strong. They have impressive abilities from head to toe. And it's usually inabilities to like rotate and bend and maintain posture under really weird, fucked up positions. So it's like, even you look at someone who's squatting, guess what? Pronation and supination at the foot and stuff like that, that standardly has to do with center mass over the middle of the foot. What changes my center of mass? My torso and my spine does. So if I'm unable to actually move my spine over top of the middle of my foot very well, I'm probably not going to be very good at squatting or deadlifting. Right. Or you're probably just going to get a whole bunch of overloaded hamstring tissue and your quads won't develop. And now you're doing it as a yank instead of a push and a pull. Right. So there's a couple things that, like, if you just start throwing like bricks into different places in the body or like things that just don't move, a lot of these issues are pretty standard anymore because it's like, yo, you took away an option that you realistically need to be good at this motion. And you're so underdeveloped at that option that you can't, your underlying ability isn't even bottom end on a good day.
Right. Right. So one thing here, I think this will maybe make sense for anyone listening, is allowing your body to get into positions like what you were just explaining with the yoga blocks under your T-spine. It's somewhat passive in that it's like, hey, let's just set you up in such a way and put you there, and then we can do some more stuff from there. We can expand on it. Mm-hmm. One maybe more an additional example, something that I've used, is that people who struggle with squat depth, they're like, getting to parallel is like seems impossible to them. If you get someone to sort of like hold on to a post and put themselves in that position, kind of walk themselves down, then we know that, like, okay, your knees and your hips, you can go here. You don't have the strength or the coordination or the control to do this actively yet, but we can put your body in this position, and then for some reason that allows them the ability to then get there. And I don't know how to explain this, and maybe I'm explaining this poorly, but it seems to me it's like if we can get the body to go there, then the body realizes like, oh, this position is safe, this is okay, and now we can allow some motor control to happen in this position that was previously quote unquote unavailable to us. What do you think about that? And can you explain that maybe in a better way than I just did?
Some people's bodies are a little different. So some people are dealing with a physical muscular issue where they're actually just not strong enough to adapt the position. Mm-hmm. And then some people are dealing with learning issues and neurology and stuff like that, where it could just be like, hey, I've never experienced this in position before. And as soon as I do, I can drop my butt all the way down to my heels. The thing that I've found with like people who live a little bit more in common day society, if they don't like work like a manual job where they're moving a ton, it's probably not the neurological learning. It's probably actually just weakness over time from stagnantness. Mm-hmm. You start losing abilities, even walking under 8,000 steps a day, you start losing some really important abilities, even just in like tissue resiliency of like, can your foot support walking for more than like 20 minutes? Like people's abs, they start getting side stitches walking up a freaking flight of stairs. And they're like, yo, man, like you're winded from a flight of stairs and you wonder why you can't run. Like, I know why you can't run. Do you know why you can't run? It's just unrealistic expectations based on where we're currently at. The biggest thing that I think I have found is like most of the time, if you put weight out in front of someone, They can usually figure out how to drop to depth unless someone's just been like pounding at their body too freaking long and their hips are just like stiff and brick solid, their hamstrings are brick solid. That's not really going to be, it's going to be a little bit of neurology and physically, mentally learning how to decompress and let that body relax, where like some of its activation is some of it's active mental relaxation. So like when I
Yes.
first started stretching and I started working through, my hamstrings were absolutely miserable. But my hamstrings were also twisted. So they were rotated at the wrong angle a little bit. And this is one reason why people's hips get jimmied out of place. One of their hamstrings flips over. And now every time that hamstring fires, the pelvis tips over. So that's something that standardly needs to be moved over by like a good massage therapist or something like that. It may not just automatically shift over. Anyone who's over, I would say, like 185 pounds, it's probably not just going to handle itself.
Right.
So this is the thing, is we keep thinking of like the body in a linear path, and your muscles rotate around your femur. Your glute stretches around your hip. Your rib cage rotates and shortens in different patterns this way a lot of the time. Or if it doesn't, you're probably not going to be good at anything semi-athletic. So the thing is like a lot of these things where we've just like either jammed ourselves under a straight bar too long, like I hadn't rotated in like 10 years. It doesn't surprise me that I felt the way that I did or I had as many issues as I did. The problem was when I was first coming into weight training and stuff like that, the knowledge realistically, like it was either in books or you didn't get any of it. Like the social media and stuff realistically was not a thing until the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Like even the last 10 years, like Instagram was totally different. I had my first Instagram account back in college, and like this is not what it is now. This is not even close.
And it's certainly like any of the things we're talking about today. This is not. I'll speak for you. I'm sure you didn't learn this in school. I know I didn't learn any of these things in school. You learn, the basic physiology and stuff, and you come out a pretty useless coach.
Is
but
the ability to learn and background information.
yes,
So the reason
exactly.
why bio degrees and ex-phys degrees and all this different stuff have A&P 1 and 2, bio 1 and 2, and all the mechanics and all the energetics of the body systems is because when you're sitting there and you're doing an evaluation on someone, if you don't know that shit, you actually will look pretty stupid. So the thing is like, I find the better information is like, yes, you do need to learn how to coach and you need to learn how to apply things. But when you read a paper, when you read someone, this is why, like, when I look at a lot of these like influencers and coaches out there and I'm sitting there and I'm watching and I'm like, this is total bullshit. Any of the good coaches usually have a little bit of a background education. And the simple fact is as soon as they hear something that's off, they're like, no, I remember this from a textbook that's not accurate.
Yeah.
Or I remember this from a study I read and this person's totally full of shit. But then you say you're full of shit and now everyone attacks you. And I'm like, okay, you can go look it up in the textbook from like 2005 or something like that and go do your own damn research because I'm not being paid to be your teacher.
Right. And the thing is, like, we're not making things up. Like, things are the way they are. I have no opinions. It's just these are the facts, and that's it. But anyways, moving down the body a little bit. People have after the spine, hips is probably the next most like thing that I hear. But my hips are tight. My hips are tight. People have really tight, the front of their hips, the front of their legs from sitting too much, from whatever. Maybe the end of this would be like a front splits, but obviously that's not the entry point. So what would the entry point be for someone who's looking to loosen up their hips?
I start almost every single new client with seated good mornings just because of the simple fact that like I used to start them with hex bar deads and different things like that. But the thing is if you're doing a seated good morning, there's a couple constraints around it now. Your butt's on a chair, your knee's in a fixed position, and your foot's in a fixed position. And now you're learning to lengthen at your spine and you're learning how to move at your hip, and your foot and your knee are no longer a standard variable. All you're doing is using them as a kickstand and getting used to pushing into the floor. Automatically hips start opening as soon as you take the ability of the knee to move away. Most of the time when you're trying to teach people, you even look at guys like David Gray and stuff like that, and all he's cueing is don't move your knee. Don't move your knee. Nope, I'm just telling you, stand up. Don't move your freaking knee. Don't move it. And all he's doing is taking away the option of moving your knee, and now your hip physically has to do the job. So most of the time in coaching, you need to be able to set up situations and constraints and systems where all I have to do is hand you a weight, and the constraints of the exercise is going to get the achieved goal. And they're like, why am I doing this? Because you compensate a lot and you don't use your feet and you bend too much at the knee when you're trying to get something posterior dominant. I need you to stop trying to bend your legs so much and actually just lengthen. So even looking, I would say some people would say a 45-degree back extension is usable for this, but honestly, I feel like most people's knees and the backs of their knees are too freaking stiff for this at the start. Like, I would think of a 90-degree back extension, probably a little bit more of an advanced one, in my opinion, anyway. Unless someone just like is physically pretty flexible automatically. I know the back extension, when I first started in, if you have stiff hamstrings, it's going to feel horrible on your back doing that for the first time, because now you're expecting your hamstring to hold your entire body, and the pad probably hurts your quad because your quad's not strong enough to extend the knee. So now you're dealing with pain on both sides of the equation. If I sit you on a box and have you hold a dumbbell out in front of you and say, okay, bow forward and don't fall over at the shoulders, now you have one option, and that's to move through your hip.
Yeah.
So learning how to kind of get this leverage over the right tissue is probably the best asset we have as coaches in creating an environment. I think a lot of coaches try to destabilize people too freaking soon in the name of force production. And I'm like, you do realize you'll jump and run and do things better if you just get used to pushing into the floor. I don't care if you're holding a stick or not. Hold the stick, use another 20 pounds on the freaking dumbbell and get some force production so you actually get used to moving something more than your body in space. I don't need a dynamic aspect to most things. Most of the time, like, I do my balance work and stuff like that without load, because it's like all I'm realistically chancing is falling and tweaking the crap out of something sometimes. Don't get me wrong. We get into some ballsy stuff with like single arm work and single leg work, but like the design around it is already something to be more advanced and challenging. It's not something I'm using as a basic to show someone how to integrate through their foot and through their hip. It's like you see like the athlete who can do like the 315 squat on the scooter or something like that, or where the heck it is. Now, I'm going to say this. They didn't do that 315-pound squat on the scooter to become a good athlete. They can do that because they're an athlete.
100%.
It is completely ass backwards. Yeah. So learning how to jump and learning how to move through the hip and learning how to do all these things with like somewhat form of control and then making it dynamic in like a jump or a landing. It's a lot of this still falls under the initial premise is entry point.
Yeah.
How do I set you up for the most success possible? So if I turn my head, you're less likely to do something ridiculous and you're still getting the stimulus. So I can go pick something up and I know for a fact you're going to do 8 perfect reps because you're not going nowhere.
It feels a lot of the times like it's teaching someone, a client, how to where their body is and that part of their body like even exists. I think maybe a way to paint this picture is if you ask someone to do a bicep curl, like just raise your hand up to your shoulder. I think most people, certainly not everyone, but most people could figure out how to like flex their bicep in that position. And maybe that's just because like, you do a bicep curl-ish to like take a drink, to use your phone. You're maybe more familiar with that. But in your example, I think almost no one who's a beginner, they have no idea that their hamstrings even exist. You ask someone to flex their hamstring or use their hamstring in some way, and it's like, you can see that their brain is working and that they're really trying, but nothing happens at their hamstring until you set them up in such a way, like you're saying, where it's like, nope, this is the only thing that has to work. And then that light bulb feeling goes off and it's like, oh, that's my hamstring. Oh, wow. That feels like something I haven't felt in a really long time. And then once you get that feeling, now you can start to learn to control it and expand it and actually do something with it.
I always found that one of the easiest tools that I found for softening up hamstrings is single arm RDLs with a little bit of a crossbody. One of the things is as soon as you start to change planes of motion, if you instruct someone to balance their feet and to not let their knees shift apart, you'll automatically start feeling a stretch in your hamstrings, and you'll feel a stretch in your hip and all these different things. Most of the things is we once again try to make things a little bit too linear, and we need to give ability for the body to actually self-organize around something. It may not be initially the best self-organization, but it's why you're not giving them anything stupid heavy in the first 2 to 3 sets anyway. Usually once I see people get like 1 or 2 sets where like it at least somewhat looks okay, I bring them up at least another 2-3 dumbbell sets immediately, because I'm like, I want you to have enough weight in your hands that you can't do anything stupid with.
Yes. Yes.
Like you shouldn't be able to
so
side raise your Bulgarian split squat weight. Like this is why I gave you the freaking stick. I want you to balance and hold something heavy and push into the floor. So,
this is so good. This is so good, because I think a lot of people actually do stuff wrong. They do themselves a disservice by not lifting heavy enough.
No one wants to hold on to anything. They want to look like, oh, I can do it without the stick. I'm like, I know you can freaking do it without the stick, but you don't have to.
Right.
You can load more. You're going to get bigger legs. You're going to look more impressive. Your foot will do more, because you're not spending 80% of your energy just stilting on one foot.
Right.
Like, drive intent.
Yeah.
Like,
I think that this is most commonly or very commonly seen with an RDL, specifically to your example, and it's because it's a pretty strong movement. Like once you can organize your body, like you lift a lot of weight doing that. And so you might start off with, just a dowel or
with RDLs with 500 before. I used to love pause RDLs off the floor.
There you go. There you go.
I used to do upwards of 3 to 5 second pauses, hovering it right off the floor, because guess what? Or you do it off a deficit, and then you kind of just learn to settle in and do it with a less of a straightened knee. You want to do it almost like if you were just going to like do like a touch and go push, but don't like almost hover the weight and stay tight. Right. So some of the things is like, if you just slow it down, and no one wants to slow down, is most likely the biggest thing here that we're probably running into, where everyone wants to get to Z, but they're not willing to go through the alphabet on the way up. I tell people this within regards to pain. You have exactly the same amount of rungs down the ladder to get into the hole as you do to get out of the hole. So if you've been going down those rungs for a while, it's going to take about the same amount of time to come back up, most likely. Not saying that's an exact science, because if, let's say, you've been struggling with something for 8 to 10 years, it might start cleaning up in like a month or two, but realistically, like, it's probably going to take a couple years of you digging in and moving in the right direction, because it's been beaten to crap for 10 years.
Yeah. No, that's a very good, important point.
You've been scratching the roof of your mouth with your tongue all freaking day, and the top of your mouth freaking hurts because you poked at it too much. Like, it's the same thing. We're just pissing stuff off too much, and we haven't given it the environment to allow it to actually settle down. And that doesn't mean not training. It means doing different things.
Right. And things that might not always be fun or cool or exciting, but it's getting you to an end goal. And I think that people need to remind themselves sometimes that the point of training is to improve. It's not to, like, if you're trying to just have fun, like go, training can be fun, but if you're trying to get better at something, you need to do the things that are going to get you better at that thing, not just the thing that is fun, because those are two different things. They can be related, but a lot of the times, especially when you're working out of pain, it's not that fun. And just
if you're dealing with probably like more than 1 or 2 or 3 compounding injuries, I'm going to tell you very, very directly, the process out of those injuries is going to be the most unfun thing you have ever done. Nothing you do will be fun to get out of pain, because the thing is you're already in pain. So everything you do is going to hurt a little bit. Like every time I did the sit-up, I got a zap down my freaking butt cheek. No, it didn't feel good. And no, it didn't feel right. But you start learning how to adjust yourself so the zap does not happen. And it's also about picking the constraints of the system, knowing that, okay, if I slow this down a little bit, point A to point B becomes much more achievable. It needs to be achievable is the bigger thing. Like, yeah, some things are probably going to suck, and nerves are going to hurt on like a 5, 6, or a 7 at times. Should it hurt for the entire process? No. But like if your arm is not used to going overhead, it's probably going to feel kind of shitty when it goes there. I don't know, the first like 4 to 6 weeks of a new pattern doing it.
Right.
I mean, you look at this in itself, the fact that we want to talk about new tissue growth taking anywhere between 6 to 12 weeks, and I'm giving you a pattern in the first 3 weeks, you say it hurts like a motherfucker. Okay, I'm aware it hurts like a motherfucker also because you have no tissue in the line of pull to actually support that. And if I give you something less aggressive than what I currently gave you, it won't do the same thing.
Yeah.
And if
I think it's also
back it
differentiating.
up, I can try to back it up, but sometimes there is nowhere to actually back something up from. You actually just need to make it manageable, at least for the first like 5-6 weeks.
Right. It's just a differentiation between the necessary discomfort from doing something new and trying to grow and improve versus causing actual pain. If you're like making the injury worse, or like something legitimately is an injury, like that pain and discomfort thing is a fine line. And I think that most people, because they haven't been so injured, because it's not their profession, it's a hard line to figure out at the beginning. You know, you do a regular set of anything and it's like, oh, I'm sore, I'm in pain. It's like, no, that's just regular muscle soreness. You did bicep curls with 10 pounds. Like that, you're not injured. You're okay. You know, you're fine. That's just your biceps working.
I love watching David Gray when he works with his people and stuff like that, just because of the sole fact that like he doesn't coddle anyone, and he very directly explains things, and he'll just give you the same cue. He's not going to change it up. He's not going to make like anything like softer, nicer, whatever it is, but he's going to make you work for it. And he's going to literally sit there and watch you freaking shake for 30 seconds, even though it's absolutely miserable. But the fact is he's done this with enough people to know that that is actually what it takes to rehab something.
Yeah.
You need that stimulus to suck so much that inside of the proper bubble that it needs to happen inside of, that your body actually builds up better. This is one of the reasons why I actually just like way back, it's one of the reasons why I did not want to go to physical therapy school. My undergraduate was bio pre-physical therapy. I was supposed to go to PT school. And I did about 500, 600 hours of shadowing, and I was appalled at how disappointed I was with all the physical therapists that I shadowed. I shadowed 2 or 3 different ones, a couple hundred hours a piece. And it was the same thing. People come in, they do a couple hip bridges, they warm up 10 minutes on the bike, and it's like nothing. And I'm like, this is atrocious. I'm not going to spend another $100,000 to go to school and looking at it now, I understand that I could have changed how things were done, but that wasn't the thought process at the time. I was like, this is the industry. I don't want to do this. And now I'm kind of doing that with people, and I'm getting people who did not succeed with physical therapy.
Yeah. I mean, that's almost exactly my same experience with chiro. I went to school for a year and I was like, this is not it. And again,
my chiropractor
same
told
as
me
you.
for 4 years that my spine was perfectly fine. He never told me that my pelvis literally wasn't in the right place. Like,
right. And the same as you. It's like, it's not the profession's fault.
For
it's
the bones.
Right.
You can't tell me that a pelvis isn't in the right place. I can look at someone standing and tell you their pelvis is in the wrong place.
Yeah.
Like,
this is the thing, is like, it's not the profession's fault. It's all the stuff you learn outside of it. And so when you're in it, you realize like, oh, this is not necessarily what I thought it was. It's incomplete. There's a lot more that I got to do outside of the confines of this institution and this profession, quote unquote. And so you can now, similar to you, I think in hindsight, I would have gone through it and then just like done all my own other stuff on like outside of the school for the purposes of the title and all that stuff. But like, I was too young.
Look at even like our parents' era, most likely. I don't know how old you are. I'm 33.
I'm turning 30 in a few weeks.
Yeah, you're close enough. It was that era where it was like you go to school, you work for 30 years, you retire, and that was it. No, entrepreneurship was not a thing. Coaching was not really a big thing where I lived anyway. That's why I moved to New York City, because I was sitting there and I'm like, this is like a black hole for coaching. It's like doesn't exist. Yeah. And when you're freaking 21, you have no money to your name to even start anything, and no one's going to give you the freaking money to do it, most likely. Yeah. So back then, I didn't even have the know-how to set something of that nature up. And even the funny thing is most of the places I interviewed at, they would not hire me. They would not. Equinox gave me my first legitimate chance. So that was actually a good thing on their part. But
Yeah.
I'd even applied to multiple different lifetimes in Pennsylvania, and I got denied at 3 different lifetimes. I went through 12 interviews. And the thing
Well, this is the
is
thing.
like,
We were
I
talking
look
about it
at
before
this
we
now,
recorded.
I look at this now and I think about it, and I truly believe that the universe gave me a freaking nudge to come here, because otherwise I do not see my body rehabbing the way that it did. I probably would have been stuck on the floor living in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Most
Yeah,
likely.
that's real.
I would
That's
not,
real.
I would have lost the ability to train, and I don't feel like I would have figured out the things that I figured out here, because my clients here are the reason why I figured things out, finding my coach, finding all the experiences and all the different stuff I had to kind of just like enjoy the suck through, where it's like you almost just have to like suffer for like 6 to 8 years and then just like, okay, I'm getting pretty good at this now.
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
like
So this is I mean, this is the story of myself and yourself, obviously, and
more.
exactly. And it's so many coaches where it's like, hey, we went through this shit on our own, and it was not good, and it was not fun, and it was tough, and it was all this stuff. And that's very different than the person who is, 22 years old. Not that you couldn't be a good coach when you're 22. It's just there's not that many good young coaches, and I was certainly horrible when I was that age, and whatever. But you just haven't been through enough shit. And so it's like, if you're just 22, never been injured, never been out of shape, and you just, you have a 6-pack and you like look good and you start posting stuff to your coach, like you just don't know what you don't even know what you don't know, versus people
I'm probably
who've
going to
been
get
through
flack
it.
for this, but I don't even care anymore. Before the age of 25, most people suck at everything.
But yeah, I think that's valid. I think that's valid.
Most people suck at most things professionally, they suck at before the age of 25. Like they talk about like the 10-year standard on things, and there's a reason for that, because it takes you a certain amount of time to make enough mistakes that you actually get some of the good stuff out, and you actually start figuring out like, okay, well, we tried this for a legitimate 2 years and it realistically like didn't help, because also when you're dealing with the human body, it does not change quickly.
Yeah.
So if you're working with a dozen clients and you're trying new things over 6 months to 12 months, well, there's a year right there. Well,
and you have to do that. That's where you're going to learn
Let's
stuff.
try something else.
Yeah.
Let me take a mentorship. Let me figure a couple more things out. Maybe I try to get more educated in a different couple things, or maybe I try to pick up some new skill sets. The biggest interesting fact is that when I started dabbling into body work, my coaching got 10 times better, because I understood lines of pull, and I also understood the rotations that occur at the body 10 times better, because you can physically feel them. Like when you're evaluating as a bodywork specialist and you're doing this stuff, like you don't look at people the same way anymore. You like can't turn it off. Like you just keep evaluating all the time. You can't stop evaluating. You're just seeing structure misalignment. Like, and it's not always a fun thing, but I tell coaches this when I'm like, listen, I'm going to teach you some stuff, and it's going to be something that you literally will never be able to unsee. And I've been told exactly the same thing after it by a couple of my clients and a couple of my clients who are coaches. And I was like, listen, I'm going to point something out to you, and you're going to see it in everyone, and it's going to drive you insane. And then a couple of weeks later, they're like, it happened. Everywhere. I have to like walk, and I like have to do this. I like can't unsee it. And I'm like,
yeah.
Because those are the things that are made to be staples of your education. The shit that you literally cannot unsee in people is the stuff that we need to focus on. Yeah. Because if it's something that you keep noticing that is so out there, it's probably somewhat significant.
I agree, and these are things that are just simply not, not.
We
taught
deal
in,
with this.
Not
we
taught in
deal
school.
with this with emotions and stuff as well. If it's bugging the crap out of you, it's probably something a little bit significant. Is it significant in the grand scheme of things? Maybe no, but to you it is. So maybe something needs to be done about that. And if we're going to be fitness professionals and coaches and like things of this nature, you are going to have to trust yourself in some form or fashion along those lines too. I second guess myself more than freaking anyone else. I'm sitting there and I know I've done the same thing with people like 9, 10, 11, 12 billion times. And I'm still giving something to someone and I'm sitting there. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
What if they do something stupid? Or what if I give them a extended arm bicep and someone's elbow just blows out? That's a thought I have on the regular, especially after
Yeah,
my own
no,
trauma.
me too. And I think this is the sign of a good coach or a good practitioner in anything. As the second you think that you're the best and you know everything and you have no room to improve or get better, like you're done. You suck at that point. You've always got to be questioning yourself. And every year I look back at programs that I've written for clients or things that I did with clients, the previous year, a couple of years ago, and I'm like, oh geez, I'm way better now. And in 2 years I'll look back at what I'm doing now and be like, well, I'm way better now, right? And that'll just forever keep happening.
I saw some of the stuff that I was writing probably like a decade ago, and I still remember so at the back end of my master's, I did an internship at Princeton, and there was a guy there named James DiVincenzi. He's still there. He was primarily the strength and conditioning coach for the wrestling team and like another like 8 of their teams, even football and stuff. But he said this way, way back, and this still chimes in my head. And I remember him saying this because we had to process in a 52-week program where you had a team and you didn't get it to apply it to a team, but you had to write a program for 52 weeks and program the entire freaking year and season.
Right.
And you had to hand this in. You get graded at the end of your internship. So he said to me, and I will always remember this, he's like, I remember when I first started working here and I started looking back I've been here for like 8 years at the time or whatever he said. He's like, I look back at the first programs that I wrote for my first teams and I am appalled at what they look like. But now I look at what I have picked and how the evolution of that has come through over time. And the big thing is when you need to make sure you're learning from those stupid things. The biggest mistake a coach can make is not understand when you're being ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'll tell you when I'm being ridiculous. I know when I'm being ridiculous. It's sometimes on purpose to make a point. But the thing is if you're being ridiculous in your expectations of what's actually going to get someone from point A to point B, and you're so overshooting or you're so undershooting, I think we need to go back to square one and we need to have a real conversation about what you actually need to focus on in building in people. Because guess what?
I agree.
You can actually take almost anyone off the street and focus on like 3 big skill sets, and every single person will get better. If you teach someone to move through their knee, if you teach someone to move through their hip, and you teach someone to move their spine, 99% of everything else is going to start making sense to them. I don't care what the person looks like. I don't care how messed up they are. I don't care if they're missing a leg. It will start to make things better. How are you going to get it done is now the larger question. Yeah. So
no, very much agreed. And I think for anyone who's not a coach, it's like if you've been doing the same stuff over and over and over again, and you're not getting the results that you want, physique wise or performance wise, or getting out of pain, or whatever it is, the thing that you're trying to do. If you keep doing the same stuff over and over again, you're not getting better, you're not improving, then you need to really look at yourself in the mirror and be like, hey, something's got to change. I have to do something different. And that doesn't mean, I tried it for 2 weeks and it didn't work. It means like, hey, you've been trying something for 6 months, a year, 3 years, and it's not working. Like, you got to look at it and
listen.
I took
this from way back, and I don't remember which one of them said it, but one of the guys at Compound Performance, I think either Matt or Kyle said this way back. It was in either one of their seminars or some shit. I can't exactly remember. But the big thing I remember that they said was, now understand this, the best coaches have coaches, because guess what? You have to learn from someone. Unless you're like 65 and you've been doing this for your entire effing life, I'm promising you there is someone who knows more.
Yeah.
Even at 65, if you're still coaching, kudos to you. But like also at the same time, there's probably someone who still knows more in some category. So like, I think as coaches, it's more so our responsibility to keep on growing. And if you feel that you haven't done anything new in probably like 6 to 8 months, you might be part of the problem. Now, everyone's got their template and everyone's got their stuff they like to ball on the basics with, and that's perfectly fine too. But the thing is like, I mean, you're going to eat the same three foods for the rest of your freaking life and you're never going to try anything else. That's kind of it's a little bit more out there, I would say. Like,
Yeah.
doesn't always need to be fancy or crazy, but guess what? I had been spinning my tires. I did all of my own powerlifting prep and stuff like that, upwards to a 700-pound squat. I followed templates. I did my own stuff. I figured things out on my own. But the thing that I had never figured out was as to how to make my right side stop hurting all the time. How to get my hamstring tendons to stop straining every time I locked out a squat. Over 500, I used to get a tug at my tailbone every single time I would stand up with a squat. So people are like, you're lifting like really aggressively. I'm like, yeah, because it freaking hurt. I was trying to get it over with. Like, go faster. Get this thing off me.
Right. But in hindsight,
Yeah.
you wouldn't have done it that way, right?
What was it? The guy from Elite FTS, he said that was the biggest thing after he blew out his freaking pec and he was benching again and stuff like that. The reason why he got better at benching is he got explosive because he was horrified of the tendons snapping again. And he was trying to get the weight off his chest as quickly as freaking possible. It's like,
there's a lesson there for sure.
Took a negative and turned it into a positive. Is it going to be the smartest method? I don't know, but it worked for him. So getting past injury is going to take a little bit of balls, and it's also going to take a little bit of brains because you're not going to get it with just one of them.
Yeah, that's for sure. And something you're definitely going to learn from. But
it sure as hell isn't going to tickle.
That's for sure. I say that to clients all the time. Like, oh, this is like, doesn't feel great. I'm like, hey, training's not supposed to tickle. We're here to get better. We're not here to, just feel like nothing happened. So
being unable to stand up or put pressure into one of your legs is pretty uncomfortable too, but that's what we're working past. So
exactly. Not being able to take a shit by yourself when you're 90 doesn't sound like a fun time. So,
no,
here we are.
I just did that with a lady the other day. She was 82 and she has goals. Both her knees are bone on bone, barely stands up, wants to carry an infant, wants to do a couple of things. First thing I did, I put a 20-pound medicine ball on the top of a box and I said, okay, pick it up. All right, turn around, walk it over and put it on the other box. All right, do it again. Back and forth. Simple stuff. You want to be able to carry an infant? Okay, you got to pick up something heavier than about 8 to 10 pounds. And you got to be able to do it more than once.
Right.
All right. You want to get your knees are both bone on bone? Okay. So I give you a nice Hatfield handle and I put a box next to the rack and I have you hold on to the straight bar and I have you step up the box until it doesn't hurt anymore. Figure out how to step so your knee doesn't hurt. Use your hip a little bit. Use the support. Learn how to get over top of your foot a little bit better. And guess what? The tendons get a little nicer when you stop poking at them all the time. If all that you extend your knee with is your knee tendons and your ACLs and stuff like that, it doesn't surprise me when we're bone on bone and it hurts. Yeah. Like, I've seen people compete with significant deficiencies. Like, I've seen people do so much with so little. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you see guys who can like pick up stupid amounts of weight and do crazy things, and all they had was a bunch of plates and a straight bar, but they did some weird shit to get it up on their back and get it up on their shoulders. Sometimes picking stuff up, it has to be harder, and you just have to do it enough. Like,
organizing yourself and figure out how to move.
The weakest skill that most people probably have, there's 2 skills that I would no, 3. Sitting up without using like a ton of momentum, like doing strict midsection work. Picking things up off the floor, people are absolutely ridiculous with, and putting things up over their head. All of these other planes of motion are relatively simplistic. If I want to extend, if I want to move laterally, if I want to crouch down very low and still not mess myself up, there's some different things that I have to work on doing, and it's probably not going to be in the shape of a dumbbell all the time. If you don't have access to certain things, that's fine. We can make things more challenging. But like, there's still ways to get this to be like, pick something up in the least beneficial position possible. Just make sure it's light. And then build up from there. Like, oh, every time I pick up something outside of my left foot, it hurts. Okay. Pick something that doesn't hurt. All right, 15 pounds. Cool. Add 5. Still doesn't hurt? Add another 5. Still doesn't hurt? Oh, it hurts there? Okay. back it up 5 pounds. Do 3 more there. Next week, okay, let's see if we get past it. Little steps, little progressions.
That's 100% it.
You got to meet people where exactly they're at, and it's like not being too overzealous. I tell my clients this all the time. I'm like, listen, you just hit a deadlift PR and you want to do another one, and I completely understand that, but also remember the fact, let the wins stay on the board. Do not ever exchange a win on the board when you do not have to. It's like in a powerlifting meet. You hit a big PR on your second one, but it ground the hell out. Now, do I take another attempt and possibly hurt myself when that one barely freaking moved because I just want to be greedy? Or do I just move on to the next freaking event and take my win?
Yeah. No,
what's the smarter of the two bets?
It's a hard thing for people to accept in the moment, because you get excited, your ego gets into it, and you're like, I want to do more. I want to do it. But realizing that all it is that just start where you are and then push a little bit more. You
can let whatever the emotion you're currently feeling have. The biggest thing I saw the other day, and this was something that I found really important, whatever emotion you're having is perfectly viable. What you do in response to that emotion is going to be the bigger question, if you in fact do something stupid or not. So
that's incredible. Do you remember where you saw that?
Oh man.
Or who said it or anything? I like that.
One of those, like, it might have been one of those unknown quotes or something like that.
Oh, okay.
But it was like, guess what? I think I'm trying to remember the specifics on it, but the big thing it said primarily was, you're never wrong for feeling an emotion, but you can be wrong for how you react to an emotion.
Yeah.
So a lot of these things have a little bit of, you have to have more than just one brain cell floating around up there at all times. Like 2 or 3 is probably the best. If you have a couple more than that, awesome. But you need someone to check the one. Like, One, like, guess what? A couple extra voices is not always a bad thing.
No. And like, you're going to learn some lessons along the way if you don't. Exactly.
My dad used to always say, it's okay if you talk to yourself, but you should start worrying when you start answering yourself.
That's good. That's good advice. That's good advice.
Good life advice, right? Yeah, so if I start hearing multiple voices, I should just be like, okay, I'm not answering myself, so it's fine.
Exactly. Yeah. No. Hey, I agree. Man. Listen, I think that's a lot of good stuff for people to think about, and I know that we can keep going for much longer, but
I can talk with you all for today, man.
One piece at a time, because there's a lot of. This conversation, I think, is something that requires multiple listens through, because it's a little bit deeper than surface level, and you really need to go in the gym, try some stuff, come back, listen to it again, and then like take more of what you need from this conversation.
A lot of this stuff, like, it needs to be taken in like small bites, because I know that a lot of this stuff I always got frustrated because I just didn't understand it. And the thing is,
and you need to experience it as well. It's not just all theoretical in your head.
You can spin your tires at it all you want. You're not going to understand it till something clicks, and it's probably going to be somewhere that you're really not expecting it to.
Yeah.
Like, it's probably going to be in some weird off the cuff conversation, or you're going to be sitting there and someone's over and off in the distance doing something ridiculous in the gym or something like that. And something that someone said to you like 8 to 10 months ago is like, no. Wait. Yeah. Son of a bitch. Yeah. You're like mad that it took that long, but it took exactly as long as it needed to take.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's most of the time where we look at here. This stuff is going to take exactly as long as it needs to take. And that is never going to match our expectations. I think that's a good off.
Well said. Well said. No, I appreciate your time. Is there any last, what is your Instagram handle? Where can people find you if they want to learn more and keep up to date with what you're doing?
I think it's the Meatball 365 2.0.
Okay. There's an underscore in there somewhere. Anyways, I'll get it in the show notes, but something like that. Yeah. Listen, man, is there any last message quickly that you want to leave the people with here before we close?
I would say the biggest thing for any of my coaches out there who are probably still in their earlier phases, The best coaches have coaches. Learn from someone. You need even someone to bounce ideas off. And even if you're listening to this and you're realistically not a coach, it's not bad to get some assistance here and there. If you feel stagnant, like, the money's usually in the budget somewhere. Someone will at least be willing to work with you if you talk to them and you show that you have enough interest. I know I usually am, inside of my own means and everything like that. But the biggest thing is you're going to try and do everything at once, when you should probably just try to start off with focusing on doing like a couple things really, really well.
Yeah. Agreed,
Like,
man. Well said.
Pick a couple things, drive the nail all the way into the 2x4, and then pick up another nail.
Add 5 pounds and do it again. One step at a time.
Yeah, move over 2 inches and put another freaking nail in. Just swing and repeat.
Very complicated, but also very simplistic. When everything finally clicks, it's unbelievably simple, and it will make you feel frustrated at how simple it all was.
Now, guess what?
But it's going to take a long time to get there.
You don't know what makes up those nails now, do you?
Exactly.
Could be a fancy
well, listen, Ryan,
nail.
I appreciate you very much. I think people will learn a lot from this. I know I've learned a lot from this conversation. So I thank you very much for making the time to chat with us.
Absolutely. Great
look
talking,
forward to
man.
maybe doing this another time, sometime in the future, and kind of getting into the next level of all these things. But yeah, thank you, everyone. I'll put Ryan's Instagram in the show notes. You can get in contact with him there if you're in the Dumbo, Brooklyn area. Is that correct in saying that? Dumbo, Brooklyn, Dumbo, New York?
Yeah, I work at the Lifetime Athletics in Dumbo under the bridge. So if anyone wants to come on in.
There you go. If that location means something to you, then if you're in the area, then go there and visit Ryan. But yeah, we appreciate you. Thank you very much for listening, everyone. Like, share, subscribe, YouTube, whatever, all those good things. Share with a friend, and that's that. Go outside, be a good person. See you next time.